Good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dawn Dobrins, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Lighting Upgrades for Schools. All of PGE's trainings are in part sponsored by Energy Trust of Oregon. We work together to make sure the concepts and recommendations you learn are consistent across all of our individual programs and services. During the webinar today, we will introduce various lighting upgrades for the key areas in your schools. As I'm sure you know, LED technology is now safely integrated into the lighting industry and offers many viable options for your facilities. Beth has given you a handout with a few fill-in-the-blanks just to kind of help you follow along today, and you'll either see them on the screen or you'll hear them from me. So keep an ear out or an eye out for that so you can fill in the blanks as you go. Please take a note of some of the following concepts you see on the screen today, and I'm hoping that you will be able to leave the webinar with at least one of these objectives met. So first of all, you'll hear me focus quite a bit on learning how to light your school effectively and efficiently. So let's just say energy efficiently, and we will cover that quite a bit today. Hear about some of the latest technologies for upgrading your space. So LED technology will be all over the place today. Understand the benefits of improving your lighting. We will cover that, talking about the additional benefits from all sorts of things. And then we're going to take advantage of incentives and free services. So at least one of those hopefully will be a takeaway, maybe all four for you today. You've already heard a little bit about me. Now I want to know who you are. So you can use your annotation tools to check the appropriate box that fits your position. And while we're waiting for the tally, I'd like for you to be thinking of a particular space in your school that is needing an upgrade. So each of you has some sort of area that you know is either really dark, really outdated, really old, needing an upgrade for lighting. So I just want you to be thinking about that one space. It's always good to start with just one first. If you could get that completed, I think you would feel success, and then you'd have a place to go from there. On your handout, there's a notes section called Your Space in the bottom of the second page. So you can write it down right there. You know, just make a note of what space you're thinking about. And as we go through the webinar today, as it applies, you can start writing down some information about it. That'll help you in your next steps after this webinar. Looks like we have a good variety today. We've got some facility managers, some energy managers, and maintenance people as well, maintenance managers as well. Here are a few key lighting terms we will be using throughout the webinar today, just to kind of get you started. So you might hear me using some lighting geek sort of terms, and I want to make sure you understand what each of them stands for. Most of you will know the term fluorescent, and these are different lighting sources. So you have probably a lot of fluorescent in your schools. This lamp is an HID, high-intensity discharge lamp. That you will see in high-pressure sodium, which is usually the yellow tone, and a metal halide. You probably have a few of those hanging out. And then, of course, your light-emitting diode, LED, that you'll hear a lot about today. Some of the different components we'll discuss will be a lamp. So these two right here are lamps. That's the technical term, so you can be super cool and use the term lamp now if you want to. A lot of people call them tubes or light bulbs, either way. And this would be considered a ballast or a driver. When we talk about ballast, that is referring to a ballast that would operate this fluorescent lamp or a ballast that would operate this HID lamp. But when it comes to LED, this device is considered a driver. Looks very similar to the ballast. You'll also hear the term luminaire, which is basically the light fixture. When I talk about light fixtures today, I typically don't use the word luminaire very often, but remember to always say light fixture because there are all kinds of different fixtures out there. If you're talking to a plumber, he would think you were talking about a plumbing fixture, so make sure you talk about light fixtures. And when it comes to light fixtures, there are many different options. We'll refer to some recessed troughers today. You'll see those up in like your T-bar grid ceiling. You might also have some suspended cable or pendant hung fixtures. We'll talk about pole or wall mount in exterior fixtures. And then, of course, in a gymnasium, you'll see what we call a high bay. Sometimes you'll refer to it as a low bay. If the ceiling is a little bit lower, you might have a low bay fixture there. Each fixture comes with a housing, which is the part up in the ceiling that you don't see. And then you'll see kind of the guts of it here, the lamp and the ballast covers and things like that. And then each fixture typically will have some sort of lens or louver that distributes the light appropriately or covers all of those things inside. We'll also be talking about retrofit kits. In addition to just a brand new luminaire or light fixture, there are all kinds of different retrofit kits available to retrofit your existing fixture. We've reached an era in the lighting industry now that just a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, 7 years ago, people would not have imagined. LED technology is now the main lighting source for upgrades in our territory, as well as in new construction projects. You'll see LED all over the specifications. This is very, very new for us in the lighting industry. So let's start with just the dramatic growth in LED installations through 2015. The graph here shows the compound annual growth rate in a forecast. So that is the CAGR, done by a consulting company, and they analyzed it back in 2011. They were predicting here what LED would look like by the end of 2015. And I've not seen the results of this particular company doing analysis, but I have another graph to show you that I think they were really right on. Now notice that most of the growth they were predicting is coming from the replacement of existing incumbent technology. So all of that, outdated fluorescent or HID, that's where they predicted that we would see the LED. So that's your retrofit market or your lighting upgrade market. So fast forward a few years, so by the end of 2015, last year, there were 470 million cumulative LED units installed in the United States, and that is more than double the number of LED unit installations in 2014. These LED installations contributed 278 trillion BTUs, which is British thermal units, basically a way of calculating the energy savings, which is equal to an annual cost savings of about $2.8 billion. Now, who knows what the actual sales were on that $36 billion that they predicted, but I'm guessing the sales must have been pretty accurate based on the 2.8 in cost savings. So that is meaning that they saved $2.8 billion because of the energy savings. That's their cost savings. So this table is provided by the Department of Energy, and it's a detailed breakout of the installations and energy savings by application. This last column that you see here is the estimated savings if we were to just change everything we have to LED right now, which would be an interesting concept. Notice where the biggest numbers are. Right here, we have linear fixtures, so that would be your troffers and your suspended hung, and then low and high bay fixtures. Those two we are actually going to cover today. That is where the biggest prediction is because we have so much of that product installed right now. So if you want to read the whole research and development plan, it is about 209 pages, so that might help you sleep at night. But you can find it on the Department of Energy website at energy.gov. I think you're all somewhat familiar with LED technology and what it's capable of. Here are some examples. You can use it on your glove as a built-in flashlight. You can highlight your shoes. You can highlight your eyes. Or forget paying those high-priced diamonds for those high-priced diamonds. You can make your own LED diamond ring, which is probably much more cost-effective than a diamond. I'm not sure everyone would appreciate it, though, but that's kind of fun. There are many options available for this technology, and we are pleased to be able to embrace it in the lighting industry, especially because of the significant amount of energy savings that is available, as you saw in that chart. However, my goal today isn't just about energy savings. I want you to walk away from this webinar understanding the benefits of quality lighting in your schools and how it affects the people in it, especially our students. Just think about what you're doing right now. You're sitting there listening to this webinar. What is the environment like for you? How do you learn? When you walk away, what did you retain? What is the lighting like in your space? What is the color of the walls and the carpet, and do you have any daylight in there? It makes a difference to how you learn and walk away. Especially since you can't actually see me, you don't get to see my hands, moving, or my expressions. You're just listening to my voice. And in a classroom, they have some of those same environment issues where all day long they're listening, and they really need a quality lighting environment in addition to some of the other things. So we'll start in the classroom. There are many different benefits to upgrading your classroom lighting. I read a study recently, and you can do some Googling yourself for classroom lighting studies, but they basically showed how they had tested for an entire school year a classroom that had a lot of daylight, skylights, windows, the whole thing. So most of their classroom lighting was from daylight, and then they had L.E.D. daylighting substitute, let's call it, with some daylight in it. And they basically, did some testing to see how close they could get. And L.E.D. is really helping with the daylighting source. And so do some searching yourself so you can see what the benefits were. They showed higher retention, less kids missing class and things like that. So it was a really good study. I'd recommend you doing some research on that if you need some backup for why it's important to upgrade the lighting in your schools. It's also an important reminder that our buildings have aged. Maybe not all of your schools look like this one, but they're in need of an upgrade. So 77% of the schools in the United States, our school buildings, are more than 35 years old. That's a pretty large number, and it kind of makes sense because, how often do we knock down schools and start all over? However, I did see one here in Portland recently where they just basically wiped it out and they're starting over. But it doesn't happen often, so keeping them remodeled and updated is very important. I was on a webinar yesterday about schools from Acuity Brands Lighting, and she mentioned, the instructor mentioned the third teacher environment. And if you haven't heard that, basically if you think about it, you've got your regular teacher in the classroom that the student is learning from. You have your curriculum the student is learning from. The third teacher is considered the environment, and I'm a big believer of that. I think lighting is a great start in addition to what you do with the rest of the classroom. If you can have appropriate light levels for your students, you will be succeeding in addition to saving energy. The lighting design community uses this IES Illuminating Engineering Society guide to light schools appropriately when they're designing a major remodel or a brand new school. So for you today, here are a few guidelines that the Energy Trust of Oregon and the Lighting Design Lab created, kind of a little cheat sheet you can get on both of their websites if you want to go access it. But this is just kind of a clip of that little IES guideline cheat sheet that we're using today. So just to give you an idea of where you might want to be, we look at foot candle levels. So foot candles that you see here, maintained foot candles, are kind of the measurement of light. So just think about it that way. When you're lighting your space, you have a certain amount of foot candle average throughout the space that IES will recommend. And in a classroom here, 40 is the average. And the range here is 30 to 50. So that's a maintained range. So if you were to take a foot candle meter, which you can purchase at an electrical distributor or probably online, a lighting meter it's called, or a foot candle meter, or you could borrow it from one of your lighting professional friends and go into this particular classroom that you've been thinking about, the one that you wrote down, or the space that you were thinking about, and you do some readings there and you're down in the 20s on average, you know that that's a great opportunity for upgrade. So this just gives you an idea. It's not exact, it just gives you a range so you know what to look for. And you'll notice here in the comments it says 30 inches AFF, that's above finished floor. So that's your typical desk height. And that's what you're looking at when you're trying to find out if you have the appropriate light levels in your classrooms. So if you have that space in mind, write a little note about how you want to go in there and take some foot candle readings. Some of your classrooms may have recessed fixtures. So this is a recessed troffer type of fixture that you see in the ceiling here. They may have the old-fashioned acrylic lens. They may be a parabolic louver lens. Either one, they're both recessed up in your ceiling. Sometimes they're in a row like this. Sometimes they're spaced a little bit more. And over the years, you may have upgraded these troffers with various options such as maybe fluorescent T12 to fluorescent T8 technology, or maybe some of you have changed out the lenses. You might have gone from acrylic lens to a paracube, smaller parabolic lens. They're smaller cubes, to try to move the light in different ways, or you might have added some reflectors behind it to push light out more. Either way, LED technology actually can now take you to the next level, even more energy efficient as well as high fixture efficiency. So when I say that, when I'm talking about fixture efficiency, I'm talking about all that light that's available inside that fixture up in the housing here. There's a ballast and a lamp, and then there's a lens, but the question is how much of that light is getting out and where is it going? Those are the questions. So it's usually done by percentage. So this fixture might have a 90% of the light's actually getting out, and maybe it's going all over the place and it's a little glary. So you might have moved to a parabolic where only 75% of the light is going out, but it's all going straight down, nothing up on the walls. So when you go to LED technology, you have an opportunity to move up to a different level with energy efficiency and a high-performing fixture efficiency. There are several options available for upgrading your fluorescent recessed troffer fixtures. One option is to purchase brand new LED, similar to this one you see up here in the ceiling, that has a high-performing lens, and you see the little LEDs up there. Every major manufacturer makes a version, and the cost will range, but it's about the same or close to the same as what you might have paid for a new fluorescent fixture now. It's getting close. The wattage for a new LED fixture will range from 45 to 55 watts, give or take, which is still a nice energy savings compared to that 3-lamp T8 fixture that you probably have in a lot of your facilities is around 86 watts. So you still have some energy savings. When we speak of light output when it comes to LED technology, when you're talking about equals and replacing, your fluorescent with LED, you want to make sure that you understand that LED technology is a little bit different. The terms are used differently. So it's important to note that when you comparing to fluorescent technology, that LED terms are different. So the best advice that I can give you is to think back. We had the same challenge back when we were replacing fluorescent high bays with fluorescent HID fixtures with fluorescent high bays in like warehouses and gymnasiums. On paper, when you compared them, light output looked completely different. So it didn't look like you were going to get enough light with the fluorescent technology. However, because of the way people perceive light and the way the fixture performed and how long that light lasted, they were, able to make this change, save energy, and have, the right amount of light. But there are many, many other factors to consider. So my advice to you is the best thing to remember when you're replacing a fluorescent fixture one-for-one with LED, have them install a sample and take some foot candle readings to ensure that you're getting the light levels that you need. If you want to get more technical, I would recommend having your lighting professional do a lighting layout, which they can use, which is they will take lighting software to calculate the foot candle average in your entire space. And those are very, very valuable. So either way or both I would recommend when you're talking about changing to LED technology. The wattage will likely be less, so you'll definitely save energy, but you want to ensure that you're providing the appropriate light levels. And we've seen this in lighting retrofits for years now. You just want to make sure that you are, if you want to save energy, you can turn the lights off, but we don't want to get rid of the lighting. We want to save energy but have the appropriate light in your space. You can also use an LED retrofit kit. So here's a brand new fixture from Fine Light. Here's a retrofit kit with a similar high-performing lens. from Lithonia, and many manufacturers make different versions of the kits. It's a simple transformation to your existing fixture. So you may be able to use the housing in a fixture and a kit to transform it with this lens. I've seen several different variables to it, and they all seem to do a really good job. There are different options of lenses, so you can be very creative and decorative if you want. They very efficiently will spread the light. So coming out of here, the light will go where you need it. And again, try a sample just to see. They are very comfortable to sit under. So remember that LED technology, and this is one of your fill in the blanks on your handout, has a very long life. Most of them are rated at 50,000 hours, which for the most part, they'll probably last a lot longer than that. And one of the great things about LED, like we had similar to fluorescent, is they don't depreciate as quickly as a source such as HID. So you will be able to get that amount of light that you're getting out, that initial lumens, or right after, a few months after you're getting that light output, you're actually going to keep that for much longer than you would some of the old technology. So the 50,000 hours plus is great. It doesn't depreciate as fast. So the long-term benefits are substantial because, remember, you really shouldn't have to touch these fixtures for many, many years. That will give you lots of free time, right? So in addition, in your schools, you have some indirect and direct fluorescent fixtures, and they're common in some of your classrooms, school applications. They're popular for low glare and even illumination. Over the years, you may have upgraded from T12 to T8, not as common for your retrofit kits. So you might have some cable hung or pennant hung, fixtures that look like this. A lot of them were made specifically for classrooms. LED technology is available in brand new fixtures for this source. I was able to find one kit that I'll show you that could be workable, but for the most part, you're going to be buying brand new fixtures. Still may outweigh what you already have. So, keep an eye out for some of your options here. LED versions specifically for schools from companies such as GE, Peerless, Fine Light, Cree, Cooper, Philips, and many more are available. So you can go to their websites and type in schools, and they have made fixtures specifically for that in LED. This GE fixture here has 25% downlight. So the light that's coming down is about 25%. The other 75% is going up and hitting the ceiling, which is a great way to light your classroom. The light output is very much equal to fluorescent or sometimes better. There's a 20 to 45% chance of energy savings, depending on, of course, on what you are replacing. Here's another Peerless fixture that is a classroom sort of suspended fixture. This one has 60 to 20% downlight, and it's standard with a dimming driver, so you can use these windows right here for daylight dimming or occupancy sensing or detection. So lots of opportunity when it comes to LED. These would be brand new fixtures, but they're out there. Now think about the maintenance benefits that would be available if you were to get new fixtures with LED. You wouldn't have to touch them for a long time. That would help. And they will be higher in cost. Let's just face it, they will be. And the project cost might be a little bit higher, but that doesn't mean that it's not still a benefit. So you just have to, get a quote and do a scenario for the long term. Here's a sample of a retrofit kit for a suspended type of fixture. This one's by GE Lighting. As you can see, it has a lens, and this is the bottom of it, the kit that fits on the existing fixture. However, it's really only made for two different fixtures. It's made for a Cooper high bay sort of fixture. This is their F-Bay 15, so if you have one of those, you might want to consider this. And this is Lithonia's MS5 HB, so that's kind of more like a low bay, but they call it a high bay. You might see something like this in some of your schools. If you have either one of those fixtures, this retrofit kit is available in LED. There probably are some others out there. These are two that just I was able to find. Keep looking because there might be some strips and things. Just be careful when you're doing retrofit. You are retrofitting a fixture that was made for fluorescent. So you want to make sure things are going that your distribution patterns and the lenses are portraying the light directly where you need it to go. LED tubes, as they're typically, referred to as, this LED lamp, may be an option for either your suspended fixtures or your recessed troffers, if your fixtures are still in good shape, that is, and your ballasts are still, good, depending on which direction you go. There's over 1,000 of these LED tubular type of lamps that exceed 3,100 lumens per lamp. And the reason I mention that is your high-performing T8 lamp that we've been using for several years is 3,100 lumens. So some of these have exceed the 3,100 lumens, which is great. There are several of them on the qualified products list, so you can go and type in, that you want something exceeding 3,100 lumens if you want. The distribution patterns vary, so they will not react the same way as your, fluorescent. So just keep that in mind. Here's your fluorescent lamp. Here's some of the LED tube sources and how they're distributing light, and here's like a 90-degree. So when you're putting it in a fixture, it's going to make a difference as to how it performs. That's just something to keep in mind when you're buying these LED tubes. The cost has decreased quite a bit, so just for comparison, fluorescent T8s are costing $5 or less per lamp, just depending on how many you purchase at a time. The T-LEDs, or T-LEDs, as some refer to them as, they range from $15 to $35, just depending how many you're purchasing and what kind of a contract you have, and who the manufacturer is. Energy Trust does have some incentives you'll hear about later that might help. There are basically 3 different kinds of tubular lamp styles. The first one uses the existing fluorescent ballast, and the second one is bypass the existing ballast and just wire directly to the socket. And then the third scenario is you would replace it just like you would replace a lamp and a ballast. Maybe if you went from T12 to T8, you replaced your lamps and ballast. This you would replace with T-LED lamps and a new driver. So those are some 3 options that it's narrowed down to. There are probably others out there, but this is basically what you'll see most of the time. Here's a small classroom of just about 24 fixtures total. Just to give you an example of what things would look like in your classroom as you're upgrading. So they had 3 lamp T8 existing, which is very common, and this particular classroom has a few windows. They chose not to do any occupancy sensing or daylight sensing at this time, but they know of the option for the future. So they saved about 58% in energy by changing and upgrading each of the 24 fixtures with a 36-watt LED troffer retrofit kit. And I think this one used a Phillips kit, very, high-performing sort of lens. So did a really good job. This is what the new fixture looks like. So you can see that lens is very high performance. Distribution pattern was good and very, very long life. So this was a good upgrade for them. This is an idea of kind of just what this one classroom of 24 fixtures, the initial project cost was about $3,500. They were able to get an Energy Trust incentive, this particular school was, and you'll hear more about that at the end of the webinar today, but there are some Energy Trust incentives to some schools, and then, it just depends on which kind of a school you are and how much. So they'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is a 25% rate of return, which is great. This annual cost savings is something you want to look at, because that means $476 of energy sort of savings in that classroom per year, which is very, very good. So let's stop for a minute. I've been doing a lot of talking, and use your annotation tools on the left-hand side of your screen. Let's just see everything we've talked about here in this first few minutes. Circle or highlight or put a box next to what sounds good to you. What is something that you want to start looking at in that particular space? You want to go for a brand new troffer, LED troffer? Are you going to look at some of the kits? Do you want to look at some of those new suspended fixtures that we talked about in LED? Maybe try out some of the LED tubes if you haven't already. And then, of course, maybe there's some other ideas that you have not been able to, that I have not addressed. Or maybe you're just going to stick with fluorescent. You know what? And that is totally okay. You can still purchase low wattage fluorescent and save some energy. That's cool. Excellent. So you guys are going to try out some new troffers. Very glad to hear that. Another popular area for upgrade, it will be your gymnasiums. And be sure to be looking at your handout and filling in some of the blanks here as we go along. We'll start with the IES recommendations that we spoke of in the classroom. So in the gymnasium here, you can see that it varies. So in elementary, you got, an average of 30-foot candles needed, 50-foot candles in a high school gymnasium, and then 80 for class 2, and 125 for class 1, which would be like pro or Division I college. So it goes up from there. So depending on what school district or what gymnasium you're working at, you would want to check this chart just to see. So go in, take your meter, see how many foot candles average you have in that space, and you might be ready for an upgrade there. So it's a really good way to look at it. So remember, this is just a guide, so think about your space. If a gym is what you have, you may want to consider doing an upgrade. So keep all that in mind as we continue through the case studies here. So you might still have a metal halide, maybe a high-pressure sodium, but some sort of an HID in your gymnasium that looks something like this, that type of a fixture. And your gym may be lit, may have this type of lighting in it. And, that's not bad. It's okay. If that's an elementary, you may have your average of 30-foot candles. It just depends, but that's an HID source there. You might even still have some T5 or T8 fluorescent in your facilities. This is a really nice looking gymnasium, and just to let you know, I took these pictures when my son was, doing basketball in his, I think it was junior high year, and so this was a lot of elementary and middle school gymnasiums. And when I ran across this one, which was fairly new, this is fluorescent that you're seeing there, but this is well done. You could see well, it felt comfortable. I'm sure they won all of their games in that gym for sure. And over here, it felt a little bit more dim and outdated. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what some of your gymnasiums might be looking like, and an opportunity for upgrade and energy savings. LED technology, obviously fluorescent is still available, but LED technology comes in many different shapes and sizes, and they've been produced throughout all of the manufacturers. And due to the nature of LEDs, they can make them, in circles and rectangles and some funky different shapes here, as you can see. The performance is still better because they can take those little LEDs and they can point them in the direction that they want. So that's nice. And they also have the long life that we discussed, the 50,000 hours. You're going to save anywhere from 30 to 70% in energy savings in your gymnasiums when you're upgrading, just depending on what you're replacing. So even if you have, T8 or T5 fluorescent, there's still some energy savings there in LED technology with the same amount of light or better, just depending on what you're needing. The cost will be higher than fluorescent, but the benefits will often outweigh the initial cost. So you shouldn't have to touch the fixture for a long time, and the slower depreciation, so it doesn't depreciate as quickly as some of the others, means that that full light output that you're getting, that it's guaranteeing, will last a lot longer. And if you don't have to touch it, again, you have some maintenance savings. These are very compact, so you can use the many different shapes and sizes. Not to mention, also very controllable. They work great with sensors for added energy savings. So in your gymnasium, in the school my son goes to right now, we added sensors with the fluorescent. LED, same philosophy, has no problem turning off and on all day. But adding the sensors actually saves them a lot of energy, because there are times where they only use a quarter of the gymnasium, and most of the time they're not going to turn it off during the day because, in an hour another class will come in. You can also get a light fixture here that looks just like a fluorescent. So this is an LED fixture by Lithonia, and they just basically have LEDs running all the way up here. Looks just like a tube. So if you're, fond of that shape and you want to stick with that shape and you like the distribution pattern that the linear fluorescent had, you can buy the LED version of this. A lot of people may not realize this, but the highest cost of these of the lighting system in your facilities is energy. So I'm talking a lot about upgrading your lighting, but I also want you to focus on the fact that the cost of your system, if you were to upgrade your gymnasium that you're thinking about right now, the initial cost is about 30% of that total system. the maintenance will be about 10%, but that energy, what you're paying for over the time of that, using that system is the biggest part of the cost. So keep that in mind. Anywhere that you can save energy over the long term, you're saving money for that school for a very long time. Here is a high ceiling gymnasium. This was in a community college where they had 34 of 1,000-watt HID metal halide source that you can see right there. The existing average foot candle level was 55. So if you'll remember, in community college, I think it was about 80. If you look back on our chart, I'll have it up here in just a minute. But be thinking about what they were looking for there. They ended up installing 28, so they decreased the quantity, as you can see here, 461-watt twin LED fixtures. So it was a twin that looked just like that. This is what the new gymnasium looked like. They did a full design layout, so they were designing for 74 average foot candles, and their average came out to be 70, which is very, very close and good, because they upped their foot candle levels because they felt like they were already low, but their average is 70 now. And they saved 65% in energy savings. Now that's pretty amazing. So let's look here at our chart to make sure. The gymnasium, it's a community college that's probably somewhere in between the high school and the Division II college level. So they went for 74-foot candles and got 70. I think they're right in there. And they won't have to touch these fixtures for a long time. They went for this type of shape. They didn't, they liked it. The twin looked good for them, and it worked really well. The owner was very, very, very pleased with what occurred. And at this point in time, they did not do any controls, but they have the option to add those later, so they can do sensors, occupancy sensors to turn some of them off. But right now, they're controlled differently, so they felt like it was okay. So this particular package by Hall of Fame is a 48,000 lumen package, which at first seems like, oh, there's no way that can happen because the initial 1,000-watt had anywhere from 78 to 80,000 mean lumens or, maintained lumen output. So, but they went from 12,000 hour rated life from their 1,000-watt high bay to 50,000. So that's a huge improvement. Let's take a look at what the cost impact was for them. So then this gym was a high cost. There were 34 of those fixtures, and they were twins, twin mount, so there was a little bit higher of a cost initially, but they got a big incentive from Energy Trust, and this is key. Rate of return was 27% with this scenario here, but this key right here is important. They saved annual cost savings, so each year they're saving $8,900 in that school because of the energy savings, which is excellent. Remember that the Energy Trust incentive may vary depending on what kind of a school you have. So in all these crazy shapes, let's get some audience participation here, see if you guys are still awake. Which shape do you like best? What would you use for your gymnasium? So go ahead and use your tools to circle, highlight, and remember that you have to click somewhere else after you've done your annotation. Excellent. Some of you like the little flying saucers there. That's great. I have to admit, I would probably stick with the one that looks like linear fluorescent for me, which is really funny because it was hard for me to adjust to that from your standard HID, type of fixture. So excellent. Thank you for your participation on that. So we're coming into a close here with the last section. We're going to talk about outdoors. So let's get outside. You don't want to forget that. We haven't covered every area of your school. We're just doing the 3 highlights today, which would be your classroom, your gymnasium, and your parking lot and building mount fixtures on the outside. Also have office areas, storage, and hallways to address as well. And just so you know, you can use some of these applications that we just discussed in classrooms earlier for those applications as well. So this is another popular area for upgrade. IES recommends anywhere from 1 to 1.5 average foot candles in your parking lot. Now this it varies because it depends. Like it says right here, if security is an issue, raise average level to 3. So remember, it's an overall average in your parking lot that you're looking for. And I'm going to just give you a couple of examples. But one of the highest key points when you're updating to L.E.D. is to remember what can they do for in between those poles. So when I'm walking in a parking lot, in between the poles is pitch black. That is a little bit more nerve-wracking. So what you want to do is try to get your distribution pattern coming out of that fixture to highlight as far out as they possibly can. So most of your parking lots will look like this before you've changed to fluorescent, or some of you might have gone to fluorescent, but before you've turned to L.E.D., this is an HID source, and that's a pretty common fixture for your parking lot. Here's some common replacement for L.E.D., and of course you can put sensors on L.E.D., which is awesome, because before, when we had HID, you couldn't add an occupancy sensor or a dimming device on this as much because of the restrike or the warm-up that happens with HID. It takes too long for them to come back up after you've turned them off, as you know. But LED comes right on, instant on and off, so you can do occupancy sensors or you can dim down your fixtures, and I'll show you a sample here very soon. So your typical here would be 400 watt. And just kind of a rule of thumb replacement that we often offer to people is maybe just if you're going to look at wattage alone, maybe a third of the wattage would have your equal light output or the light output that you need. But again, remember, you're looking for an average foot candle. So what kind of, foot candle levels do I need in my parking lot is the question you need to ask, instead of just what do I need to replace it. But just for rule of thumb, you could go with a third of the wattage just to get started. When you're switching to LED, you also need to consider, here's a before and after picture. Think about color, so this is more of a high pressure sodium parking lot. Hard to tell what a car looks like in that parking lot. This is an LED source, which you sometimes could have with metal halide as well, but there's so many opportunities for LED. The color is so much better, and see how far the distribution took in between the poles. You can see a lot better. As far as the third of the wattage is concerned, if you were taking an HID 400 watt out, you might look around 150 watt LED just to get started and see if that's going to give you the lumen output that you need. Just be really careful about the distribution pattern. Look for things like type 1, type 2, type 3, type 5 distribution patterns, and ask your lighting professional, what kind of distribution pattern does that pole light have? If they don't know what you're talking about, you probably should move on to somebody else, but you want to make sure that it's distributing the light where it's needed and it's appropriate. So consider color and distribution patterns to be really important when it comes to pole top parking lot lighting. Here's an example. This particular parking lot had some 400 watt HID on the poles here, 250 watt wall packs on the building, 70 watt under the canopy. That's just a recessed down light right there that you often will see. You probably have some of them under canopies in your schools as well. So what they ended up doing was going with a 141 watt LED, brand new pole top fixture, a brand new LED 72 watt wall pack, and a brand new 16.4, which you can do with LED now, downlight. They also added a motion sensor on their pole fixture and actually dimmed it down to 30%, which I'm going to show you an example here in just a moment. So as far as light levels were concerned, they originally had 3.9 foot candles directly under the pole. So their new fixture is now at 3.2, which is fine. Halfway between the poles, the important part, they had under a foot candle, so they had 0.072 halfway, right in between the poles. And then with the new LED fixture, they went up to 2.6 in between the poles. The wall packs were about 0.22 foot candles, where they were trying to light the space down here. So they're trying to light some of the sidewalk and some of the area where people are walking, and they were not doing that job. They were able to get up to 2.7 foot candles, which was perfect. The downlight was at 7 and went up to 11, and it was probably a little bit overlit when they got done. So let's take a look at the cost and savings that they were able. This parking lot was almost $34,000. They got an Energy Trust incentive, and were able to save $8,278 per year. And remember, that's just per year. So how long are you going to have that parking lot? Every year you're saving that money now. So the rate of return is 47%, which you can't say no to that for sure. So I'm going to pass back over to Beth here and just kind of show you a sample, a video sample that you'll be able to take a look at, and I'm going to walk you through it. So I just want you to keep an eye out for a couple of things, and you can make your screen larger if you need to in the right-hand corner of the video. So we're looking across the street of the retrofit that we just talked about. So this is the lighting across the street. See the, high-pressure sodium glow? Hard to tell what color that vehicle is right there. So changing from the high-pressure sodium or outdated, very old metal halide can really help you be able to see what's going on. Now, don't look at the person walking, look at the light. So take a look at the light fixture, stare at the light. It might freeze for a second, but just keep staring at the light fixture. I'm asking you to look into the light. There you go. Did you see that brightness? Excellent. So basically what happened here is they did a parking lot retrofit in this parking lot, and they had, full brightness was a 3 whatever foot candles. And then what they ended up doing is dimming them down to 30%. So when you saw me walking under that pole, basically, you want to see it again? Okay. Keep an eye on the fixture. So they're down now at 30%. And when you see motion underneath it, keep an eye on the light fixture. There you go. There. Comes up to 100%. So what does that do for you? First of all, saving a ton of energy because you didn't need that full light output throughout the night. But also security. It can help you, when you're getting into your car, the space has better lighting. It could help you if somebody's trying to break into your car. It might scare them off. That's always good. Or maybe the robber is thinking, cool, I can see better, but hopefully not. So I just wanted to make sure that you could actually see kind of a sample on that. Anytime you're doing LED, you have an opportunity for dimming, and you should definitely go for it. So last but not least, you definitely want to make sure you cover the wall-mounted fixture too. So this is what a lot of your HID or your wall mount fixtures look like. They have an HID. This is a typical wall pack right here. And there are LED options all over the place. Again, you could use the third of the wattage. So let's say if this right here is this 175-watt metal halide on your wall, which is very common at about 16 feet on a wall. You could replace it with a lot of these LED options, maybe down at 50 to 70 watts. Sometimes, it varies, but again, make sure you're getting the right amount of light that you need on that space, because you're often highlighting a sidewalk or the area on the side of the building. You're not trying to highlight the sky. Which I should mention, there are, a lot of these LED fixtures will look like this one right here because of down light. They want the light to go down as much as possible, so it's not, you don't have any light trespass, which would mean if you had a light fixture like this or this up in it's highlighting the neighbors, it's in their face, and you don't want to do that. That's light trespass. Or light pollution that's polluting the sky, and that's a whole other subject. But each of these fixtures right here, or this kind of a fixture, are all full down light, so the light is going down where it's needed. So you might want to consider that when you're upgrading your HID if you're having some light trespass issues. Be cautious of manufacturer claims for replacement, because distribution patterns on the wall pack is also very important. This one has just one LED right there. You want to make sure where it's going. So remember the trick of installing a sample, and most manufacturers will allow that just to see if it's going to do the job that you need. So coming up next here, we get to hear from Simone from Energy Trust of Oregon, and she's going to kind of give you a rundown of what's happening with the Energy Trust incentives today.
Hi there. My name is Simone Auger. I'm with the Energy Trust of Oregon. I'm a lighting specialist in the existing buildings commercial program. And just wanted to have you take a look at the slide for the incentives. These are just examples that are available for some of the applications that Don talked about today. This is by no means the extent of the incentive offerings, so keep that in mind. We just wanted to show you a couple of examples to help you with maybe thinking about your own projects. So if we're looking at the first area where we're classrooms, and we are, Don talked about fixtures or retrofit kits for the classroom. And here's an example where incentives are available for this application, and they range from 65 to 75, and you see it says connected to controls. That basically means that new controls must be simultaneously installed to a connected, functioning, automated control system at the time of the installation. So there's a little bit more incentive for that. There's also another controls incentive available, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But basically, you can see that these incentives help offset the cost of your investment to reduce your energy efficiency. So our goal is to help you with your energy savings opportunities and help you with the options that are available. So the second item we have, this is a gymnasium example, and high bays we see a lot of those, as well as the fluorescent fixture retrofits. But basically, HID to LED, we have an example here where the incentive runs from $175 to $275. That's the incentive amount paid to you per fixture. These do have to be, all the fixtures and products have to be on a qualified product list. We can talk with you about that more in depth if you decide to contact get moving forward with the project on your own. So we just want to make sure that you have good quality products that are saving you, providing the energy savings that they're basically declaring. So on the last example, we have exterior fixtures. This is a really good opportunity. We see a lot of these projects added to schools. This becomes valuable in terms of safety as well as the energy efficiency and the improvement to the lighting quality. So in exterior fixtures, we see this example is $50 to $275, basically ranging 50 watts to 400 watts is what we see for the school's applications. Going to LED, 150 watts or less. So that's a good example. And again, in some applications, it's appropriate to add controls per fixture, and that can produce really good savings for dimmability. LED is a great technology that's allowing for additional applications for dimming and reducing energy usage. So the burn times and the output are reduced. Moving over to LED tubes, we have, Don talked about this example where LED tubes can go into an existing fixture, and there are the three different types. This example is basically tube for tube where you're including the new ballast. So you'll have to have, there's a range between existing equipment and the LED tubes going in. So this, again, is just one example of incentive amount. Lighting controls we have available, and this is, again, a range, $10 for wall switch sensors to $125 per ceiling mount occupancy sensors. I'm seeing a lot of these going into schools as well, where the classrooms are vacant part of the day, and this allows for the lighting to be controlled at the time of use, so folks are able to see when they need to see, and then the light is not in operation when it's not needed. So all of these incentives are on what we call the 190L, and I put a little clip of this here. This is our incentive guide, and this is going to be sent to you as well, so you'll have this. If you see at the bottom, we have different sections in the 190L which cover these areas, including the applications that Dawn went over today. And you'll be able to see and compare what your application is and the available incentive amounts. So some of you may have not had too much experience with Energy Trust. Previously, schools went through a different program, ODOE, but now some schools are eligible for Energy Trust, and we're looking forward to working with you. So thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thanks, Simone. So just to summarize here, even though we didn't cover every aspect of lighting in your schools, we at least gave you something to start with. So hopefully that will get you going with at least 1 or 2 or maybe 10 projects this summer before school starts back up. Remember the particular space that you wrote down in the corner of your handout that you're planning to upgrade, and start there. So remember what we talked about quality lighting. That's very important to me. I want to make sure that they're getting the right amount of light in the space so they can learn appropriately. And don't forget about all of the benefits. The energy savings is huge over time. Don't forget it's not just now that you're saving energy and cost, you're saving it over time, and the maintenance. So start planning now for your summer upgrades and thinking about your next step. So here's just kind of an idea of some of the next steps that you might want to take. And if you want to highlight and circle and check and do whatever you want, you can. But I'm going to pass it back over to Beth here and finish up. But just remember, if you have that space, go get it audited the best that you can, and get a quote and get moving on your project and get going. And we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Dawn. And I just wanted to let folks know that PGE and Energy Trust do provide free energy efficiency consultations to schools identifying savings opportunities. And you can contact Paula Conway.
Thanks, Dawn. Sorry, I was muted there for a second. I wanted to let everyone know that the PGE and Energy Trust do provide free energy efficiency consultations to assist schools, and you can contact Paula Conway at the phone number and email that you see here on the screen. And as Simone mentioned, public K-12 schools and instructional spaces receive funding through ODOE, and they're now also eligible to receive money through the Energy Trust of Oregon. And the Energy Trust is sort of officially rolling out information about this on July 1st. And when they do so, we will make sure that we forward that information on to you. So before we proceed to the question and answer portion of the webinar, I'd like to ask you to continue to submit questions to me through chat if you have them. And Dawn, our first question, we'll go over just by a couple minutes here today, folks. Our first question is, what if I have 8-inch T8 fluorescent fixtures in my facility? Are there LED options for that?
Oh, thanks, Beth. That's a good question. If you do have 8-foot T8 or T12 or T8 fixtures that you're trying to upgrade, there are some LED options. I do have some specific recommendations. Probably in some cases you're going to want to do a whole new fixture, but you also might want to go to a 4-foot version of an LED like we used to do with fluorescent. So I believe they do make some 8-foot T8 version LEDs. I just do not know how viable they are, and I'm not even sure about the incentive amount of that. So definitely yes is the answer. There are some options for it, but do some research before you do it.
Thanks, Dawn. And our second question, and it looks like our last question here today, is should I use fixture mount daylight sensors or ceiling mount daylight sensors on the cable hung fixtures next to the classroom windows?
Oh, good question. So if you have a bunch of windows in your classroom and you've got some of those pendant hung or cable hung fixtures suspended, you can do a fixture mount, daylight sensor, but for the most part what most people would do is there's a ceiling mount sensor that is connected to each of the fixtures. So let's just say you had 6 in a row that are connected on the window. They all would be connected to one sensor, and then they would dim down to whatever you've set it for when the daylight comes in. So good question.
Thanks, Dawn. It looks like actually we got one more question, and that is, will new lighting controls, such as sensors, work with all of the LED tubes that you mentioned?
That is another great question. So the tubes, definitely you can use sensors with them, but they are not always compatible. So you'll want to make sure you have compatibility when you install any type of a new LED device. The compatibility with the dimmer or the control is the key. So a lot of the manufacturers will list we're compatible with this or that, but they definitely can dim. It's just a matter of which device you're using. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks, Dawn. And that was the last question, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today.